The dinner had been 18 months in the making. 42 employees. 3 investor partners. A catered event in the private dining room of the Whitfield Club on the 14th floor of downtown Nashville, floor-to-ceiling windows, candlelight, the kind of evening that signals to the people in a room that the person who arranged it has arrived somewhere real. I was standing at the front of the room, mid-sentence, describing the company's third-year projections to the full table, when the door opened. I heard her before I saw her. Not because she was loud, though she was. Because I have known the sound of my mother's entrance my entire life. The specific frequency of a woman who has decided, before crossing a threshold, that the room belongs to her. Marlene Voss walked into the Whitfield Club dining room in a beige blazer and the expression of someone who had been rehearsing this moment in the car. She stopped at the edge of the table. 42 people turned. She looked at me. Then she looked at the room, assessed it the way she has always assessed any space I occupy, with that particular combination of calculation and resentment that I spent 34 years learning to read, and then she said, in a voice she did not lower. "Natalie. We need to talk about the company. Tonight. In front of everyone, since apparently this is how you make your important decisions now." The room was absolutely silent. "You are going to give your sister 20% of Voss and Company. She helped you build this. Everyone here should know that. And you are going to sign the paperwork tonight, or I am going to make sure every person in this room understands exactly who you really are." I set down my water glass. I looked at my mother for 4 full seconds. Then I looked at the table, at 42 people who worked for me, at 3 investors who had wired a combined $2.8 million into my company, at my CFO Rachel, who had gone the color of chalk, and I said, in the calmest voice I have ever used in my life, "Thank you for joining us. Why don't you have a seat?" Because the thing my mother did not know, the thing she had not thought to investigate, the thing she had been too certain of herself to imagine necessary, was that 3 months earlier, I had made a phone call. And that phone call had changed everything. My name is Natalie Voss. I am 34 years old. I founded Voss & Company, a boutique brand strategy consultancy, in my second bedroom with a used laptop, a $12,000 personal loan, and a client list of exactly 1. I built it to 11 full-time employees in year 2. 26 by year 3. By the time of the Whitfield Club dinner, we carried 42 staff, a client roster of 31 mid-sized brands, and an annual revenue of $4.1 million. I built it entirely alone. My sister, Brooke, is 31. She worked at Voss & Company for 14 months, from April of our second year until June of our third, when she left because, in her words, the hours weren't sustainable, and the role she had been given, junior account coordinator, did not reflect her actual contribution to the company's vision. Her actual contribution was 11 client call summaries, 6 of which contained factual errors I corrected personally, and 1 brand deck that I rebuilt from scratch over a weekend. I paid her $52,000 annually. I gave her 3 weeks of paid time off. I thanked her publicly at the first company anniversary event for her early belief in the business. When she left, I hugged her and I said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." I meant it. My mother did not see it this way. My mother had constructed, over the following 18 months, an alternate history in which Brooke had been the intellectual engine of Voss & Company, whose contributions had been systematically erased by a sister too ambitious to share credit. This narrative was delivered at family dinners, to extended relatives, to anyone in our shared social circle willing to listen. I did not argue with it publicly. I documented it privately. Every text message. Every voicemail. Every email in which my mother described what Brooke was owed. Every communication in which the word family was deployed as a legal argument. I kept them in a folder on my desktop labeled, Reference. And in January of last year, when I learned through my aunt, quietly, over coffee, in the way that real family information always travels, that my mother had taken a second mortgage on her home, defaulted on 3 payments, and was being pursued by a debt collection firm based in Memphis, I did not call her. I called a financial attorney. And I made an offer. I purchased the debt at full value. Not to be generous. Not to be cruel. Because I understood something my mother never had, that information is only power if the other person doesn't know you have it. And I wasn't ready to use it yet. My mother sat. The waiter brought her a chair from the service station, because I had not arranged a place for her, because she had not been invited, and she sat at the corner of the table with the comfortable authority of a woman who has never been made to feel unwelcome in her own story. I resumed the presentation. Not because I wasn't affected. Because resuming was the right move. Because 42 people were watching to see whether this woman had just successfully destabilized their company's founder, and the answer that served everyone in that room, including me, was a clear, demonstrated no. I finished the third-year projections. I thanked the investment partners. I handed the floor to Rachel for the financial summary. And I watched my mother watch the room. She was recalibrating. She had expected rupture. She had expected the version of me that existed in her narrative, the daughter who, when sufficiently pressured in public, would capitulate to avoid further scene. She had used that version of me successfully for 30 years. She was encountering a different version. After the formal portion ended and the room shifted to dessert and informal conversation, Brooke appeared. She had been waiting in the lobby. Of course she had. She walked in wearing a dress that suggested she had known about this evening, sat next to my mother, and said nothing, which was its own kind of statement. The visible half of a coordinated maneuver. My CFO Rachel appeared at my elbow. "Do you want me to call security?" she murmured. "No," I said. "I want you to set up the conference room. The small one. With the recording capability." Rachel looked at me. "Natalie." The standard disclosure statement on the screen. Full audio capture. Everything by the book. She paused for a half-second. Then she nodded and left. I walked to my mother's chair, leaned down, and said quietly, "Let's continue this conversation privately. I've arranged a room." My mother looked at me with the particular satisfaction of someone who believes they are being taken seriously at last. She stood. Brooke stood. They followed me down the hall. She came to humiliate me in front of my company. She thought she had. She followed me into that conference room completely certain she had already won. She had no idea she was walking into the last conversation she would ever initiate with me. "Stay with me." The room held 1 table, 6 chairs, and a wall-mounted screen displaying, in clean sans serif font, the standard disclosure: "This meeting is being recorded for documentation purposes. All parties are advised of this recording." My mother read it and sat down without comment. This told me everything. She was comfortable being on record. She was confident. Finally, she said, "Some privacy." Brooke sat beside her, hands folded, in the posture of someone performing reasonableness. I sat across from them. Alone. No Rachel, no attorney, no support. Just me and a glass of water and the folder I had brought from my office, which I set on the table without opening. "I want to understand the request," I said. "Walk me through it." My mother placed both hands on the table. "Brooke spent 14 months building this company with you. She was there in the beginning when it was nothing. When you had 1 client and you were calling her every night panicking. She gave you her ideas, her time, her connections." "Which connections?" I said. A pause. "Her network. Her professional contacts." "Can you name 1 client who came through Brooke's network?" "That's not the point, Natalie." "I'd like it to be one of the points. For the record." My mother's jaw tightened. "The point is that family supported you when no one else believed in you, and now that you're successful, you act like you did it alone. It's shameful. It's exactly what your father always said about you, that you'd take and never. Mom. The words stopped her. Not because I said it loudly. Because I said it the way a judge says sustained. I'd like Brooke to speak for herself. Brooke, what specifically do you believe entitles you to a 20% equity position in a company you left voluntarily 18 months ago? Brooke looked at our mother. Our mother gave her the smallest nod. I was underpaid for my contribution, Brooke said. The role didn't reflect what I actually brought. And I think you've always resented that I have things you don't, socially, relationally, and you've structured this company to exclude me because of that. I looked at her for a long moment. I'd like to make sure I understand the claim, I said. You're saying the work you performed was worth more than $52,000 annually, and that you left voluntarily despite that undervaluation, and on the basis of that, you're entitled to a 20% stake currently valued at approximately $820,000. Brooke blinked. When you say it like that. That's what it is, I said. I want us to be precise. My mother leaned forward. You owe this to your family, Natalie. We were there when you had nothing. Our house was collateral for your belief in yourself. The least you can do. She stopped. Something in my expression had changed. Not much. A very small thing. The kind of shift that only happens when a person hears a word they were waiting for. Collateral. I opened the folder. She had said it herself. She had handed me the word I needed. And what I placed on that table was not a legal document. It was a mirror. And she was about to see herself in it for the first time. I placed 3 documents on the table, face up, arranged in a precise row. In January of this year, I said, I became aware that the mortgage on your home, 4814 Clearfield Drive, had gone into default. 3 missed payments to Second National Bank, totaling $14,700, with a collections referral outstanding. My mother's face went very still. The second mortgage you took in 2021, $87,000, secured against the property, had been sold to a Memphis debt recovery firm. Meridian Capital Recovery, LLC. Brooke turned to look at her mother. In February, I continued, I purchased that debt in full from Meridian Capital. $89,400, including accrued interest and fees. The assignment was executed on February 19 and recorded with the Davidson County Register of Deeds on February 23. I slid the first document across the table. The assignment of debt. Clean. Notarized. Filed. As of that date, I said, I am your lien holder. I hold the note on your home. The silence in that room was unlike any silence I have experienced before or since. It had texture. Wait. My mother stopped. Started again. You did this without telling me. Yes. Why? I looked at her. This was the question I had prepared for. The one underneath all the others. Because you were going to lose your home, I said. And I didn't want you to lose your home. So I made sure you wouldn't. That's not, you did this to control me. I did this so you would have somewhere to live, I said. I haven't called the note. I haven't raised the rate. I haven't done anything except record the assignment and make sure the payments are current, which they now are, because I brought them current in February out of my own pocket. Brooke was very quiet. But I want to be clear about one thing, I continued, because we are on the record and I want there to be no ambiguity. The note exists. It is legal. It is enforceable. And the evening you chose to walk into my company, in front of my employees and my investors, and publicly demand that I surrender $820,000 in equity under family obligation. I paused. That evening is also on the record. My mother looked at the documents on the table. At the recording indicator on the wall screen. At her daughter, who she had spent 34 years believing she understood. "I'm not calling the note," I said. "That was never the point. The point is that I need you to hear this once, clearly, in a room where it cannot be revised afterward. I have supported this family in ways that were never acknowledged, never credited, and never reciprocated. I'm not angry about that. I made peace with it. But I will not be publicly humiliated and financially extorted in my own building by people I have already quietly protected." "Extorted," my mother said. The words seemed to land on her like something physical. "That's what tonight was," I said. "And now we both know it. She came to take something from me in public. She didn't know I had already given her something in private, and that the difference between those two things was the entire story. Stay with me for the part that actually changed us." The following morning, I met with my attorney, Dana Whitfield, no relation to the club, and provided the full recording from the conference room, the documented text history I had maintained over 18 months, and the assignment of debt records. Dana reviewed everything over the course of 3 hours. Her assessment. The recording, obtained with full disclosure to all parties per Tennessee one-party notification law, was admissible in any civil proceeding. The statements made by my mother, specifically the explicit demand for equity transfer, the phrase, "or I'm going to make sure every person in this room understands who you really are," and the implicit threat to reputational harm, constituted, in Dana's professional opinion, a documented case of attempted extortion under Tennessee Code annotated Section 39-14-112. She did not recommend pursuing criminal charges. She did recommend a formal cease and desist, a comprehensive legal notice sent to both my mother and Brooke, detailing the documented conduct, the legal exposure they had created for themselves, and the specific conditions under which I would agree not to pursue the matter further. Those conditions were 3. First, no further contact with my employees, clients, or investors regarding any aspect of Voss & Company's ownership, operations, or equity structure. Second, a written acknowledgement, signed and notarized, that Brooke held no equity interest, no outstanding compensation claims, and no legal basis for future ownership demands. Third, no public or private statements, in any medium, characterizing Voss & Company or its founder in a manner inconsistent with documented fact. The cease and desist was delivered by courier on a Thursday. Gregory Falk, their attorney, a man named David Ostroff who operates a general practice firm in Brentwood and who I suspect had not previously handled a matter quite like this one, called Dana on Monday morning. The signed acknowledgement arrived on Wednesday. My mother and Brooke retained no equity. Filed no claims. Issued no public statements. The matter, legally speaking, was closed in 11 days. The Whitfield dinner, as it turned out, became something of a company legend, though not in the way my mother intended. Within 48 hours, I had received individual messages from 11 employees expressing support. 3 of my investor partners sent notes. One of them, Marcus Hale, who had wired $1.1 million in series of funding and who is not a man given to emotional commentary, wrote 4 words, "You handled that well." I sent Rachel flowers and a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for the conference room." She sent back a single line, "I set it up the moment she walked in." I love Rachel. The company's 4th-year projections, which I had been mid-sentence presenting when my mother arrived, came in 6 weeks later. Revenue, $5.3 million. Client retention, 94%. New business pipeline, the strongest in our history. I did not tell this story publicly. I did not post about it. I did not discuss it in interviews or at conferences or in the business community where, I was aware, it would have circulated with considerable appetite. I am telling it now because enough time has passed, and because I think some stories deserve to exist on the record, not as grievances, but as data. The house at 4814 Clearfield Drive, still under my note. Current on all payments, which my mother makes monthly, on time, without fail. We have not spoken about the debt since the conference room. We speak, occasionally, about other things. Briefly. Carefully. The way two people speak when they finally understand each other's actual terms. Brooke took a position at a marketing agency in Memphis 6 months after the cease and desist. I heard this from my aunt, over coffee, in the way family information always travels. I wished her well. I meant it. I still mean it. There is a version of this story in which I am the villain. I know that. I have heard that version described to me, not by my mother, not directly, but through the ambient transmission that happens when family narratives are in circulation. The version in which I am the cold, calculating daughter who weaponized a debt to control her mother. Who set a trap? Who chose strategy over love? I want to address that version directly, because I think it deserves a response. I did not purchase that debt to control my mother. I purchased it because she was going to lose her home, and losing her home would have been genuinely devastating, and I was the only person in a position to prevent it, and I prevented it. I brought the payments current. I have not raised the rate. I have not threatened to call the note. I also did not tell her. And that part, the silence, is what people find hardest to reconcile. Here is why I was silent. Because I had spent 34 years offering help in ways that were received as control, offering credit in ways that were received as insufficiency, offering presence in ways that were received as obligation. I had learned, across those 34 years, that help rendered with announcement is not help. It is performance. And performance in my family had always been currency, used, spent, and then demanded again. So I helped without announcing. I paid without asking for acknowledgement. I secured the thing that mattered without making it about me. And when my mother walked into the Whitfield Club and attempted to use family as a financial instrument, when she stood in front of 42 people who had given years of their working lives to something I built, and demanded that I surrender a portion of it as debt repayment for love, I did not rage. I opened a folder. Because the most important thing I have learned in building a company, in managing 42 people, in navigating 11 years of negotiations and partnerships and contracts, is this. You cannot out-argue someone who doesn't respect evidence. But you can out-document them. I documented everything. The texts. The voicemails. The emails. The debt assignment. The conference room recording. The signed acknowledgement. Every piece of paper in every folder filed in every correct place. Not out of vengeance. Out of the same discipline my business runs on. The same discipline that got me from a second bedroom and a $12,000 loan to 42 employees and $5.3 million in revenue. My mother taught me, without meaning to, that love without accountability is just another form of debt, one that compounds in silence and comes due at the worst possible moments. I chose a different structure. I keep my accounts current. I pay what I owe. I document what I've given. And when someone walks into my building and tries to collect on an invoice that was never real, in front of my people, in my space, with a confidence built entirely on the assumption that I will fold to avoid a scene. I don't fold. I open the folder. And I let the documents say what I never had to. The note on Clearfield Drive remains current. Voss & Company completed its 4th year at $5.3 million. The conference room recording is filed. And somewhere in the Whitfield Club, a chair was returned to the service station. That was never meant to be pulled out. Some people mistake your silence for permission. Let them. Then open the folder. If you've ever been the one who helped quietly, who gave without announcing, who protected without being thanked, who documented instead of exploded, leave a comment. Tell me, I kept the folder. Because this community is full of women who built something real and were told they owed it to someone who didn't show up. You don't. Share this with someone who needs to hear that today.